to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome, and settle in with Deep Sleep Stories as you allow your shoulders to soften and your jaw to unclench, letting the day loosen its grip and drift away. Tonight, you'll be carried into a gentle harbor where a quiet fog rolls in like a lullaby, wrapping the water and the shore in calm, silvery mystery. Take a slow breath in, the kind that fills your chest without effort, and let it out as though you're sighing into a pillow. Feel how the exhale makes space inside you. Another breath in, unhurried, as if you're tasting cool evening air. And out, longer this time, letting your body grow heavier, as if it's remembering how to rest. Imagine you are lying somewhere safe and comfortable. Perhaps you can sense the softness beneath you, the steady support, the warmth that gathers around you. With each breath, invite your muscles to release. Let your forehead smooth. Let your eyes rest in their sockets. Let your tongue settle comfortably. The world does not need anything from you right now. And as you listen, you don't have to picture every detail perfectly. You can simply let the words be like waves, arriving and leaving, while your mind floats in a quiet place between wakefulness and sleep. In the distance, there is water, dark and calm, breathing slowly against a shore. There is a harbor where lanterns glow like small, patient stars, and there is fog, gentle as down, moving in with tender purpose, as if it has come to tuck everything in. Now, as your breathing becomes easy and automatic, the story can unfold on its own as though you're watching from a cozy window, warm and drowsy, while a peaceful night drifts by outside. In a small coastal town, a gentle harbor curled inward like a sheltered palm. It was not grand, not busy, not loud. It was the kind of harbor that preferred quiet tasks and simple comforts, ropes coiled neatly on worn planks, nets draped to dry like lace curtains, boats bobbing in their slips as if they were humming to themselves. Evening had come with a softened sky, the last color of daylight fading into a deep, velvety blue. Along the quay, lamps had been lit one by one, their light amber and mild, their reflections trembling on the water. The air carried the clean scent of salt and damp wood, and beneath it a hint of seaweed, like green velvet pressed close to the tide. A traveler had arrived just as the day was letting go. The traveler moved slowly, as if there was no reason to hurry and no desire to. Their footsteps made a gentle sound on the boards of the dock, a quiet rhythm that matched the harbor's own breathing. A small bag rested against their side, light enough to carry without strain. They paused now and then, not from weariness, but from appreciation, watching a gull glide silently toward its roost, listening to the soft creak of a mooring line. noticing how the lantern light made warm halos in the cooling air. Faintly out, bread, herbs, a whisper of faintly out, bread, herbs, a whisper of tea. But the harbor held a different kind of warmth, a calm that came from tides and repetition, from the steady knowledge that the sea would come in and go out, and that boats would rise and settle, and that the night would arrive like a blanket. The traveler found a bench near the end of the quay, where the planks widened into a small lookout above the water. They sat, shoulders relaxed, and looked across the harbor mouth toward a low headland where a lighthouse stood, slender and pale, its lantern room like a small crown. The lighthouse did not shout its presence. Its beam moved slowly, patiently, casting a soft arc over the water, then slipping away, then returning, like a reassuring hand passing gently over a sleeping child's hair. And then, almost as if responding to that beam, the fog began to appear. At first it was only a suggestion, a softened edge along the horizon, a faint milky blur where sea met sky. Then it thickened, gathering itself with quiet intention. It rolled forward in smooth layers, not rushing, not jostling, simply arriving. It slipped between the rocks at the harbor mouth, threading into the cove as though it already knew the way. The traveler watched as the fog drifted over the water, folding itself around the bows of boats, turning their hard outlines into gentle shapes. The reflections of lanterns became long, glowing ribbons, wavering softly in the mist. Sound changed too. The small noises of the harbor, clinks, creaks, distant footsteps, grew muffled, cushioned, as if the fog had laid a soft cloth over everything. A bell chimed somewhere, far and low, and the note seemed to hang in the mist a moment longer than it should have, lingering like a memory. The traveler stood and began to walk again, drawn along the curve of the quay. There was a comfort in moving through such a scene, as if the fog had made the world smaller in the best way, reducing it to lantern light and close, friendly distances. The traveler passed a little shed where crab pots were stacked, their wooden slats damp and dark. Nearby, a cat sat on a coil of rope, eyes half closed, as though it too was listening to the quiet. Further along was a small tea house near the water, built from weathered boards and painted a soft sea green that had faded kindly with time. Its windows were steamed slightly from warmth within, and a sign creaked gently as it swung. The traveler stepped inside. The room was dim and cozy, lit by lamps, with shades the color of honey. A few tables sat scattered, each with a candle flame that wavered but never went out. The air smelled of dried herbs, citrus peel, and something lightly floral. Behind the counter, an older keeper moved with slow grace, setting cups, rinsing a kettle, wiping the wood in calm circles. No one spoke loudly. Even the teacups seemed to clink softly, as if respecting the hour and the fog outside. The traveler chose a table near a window and sat, hands resting loosely in their lap. The keeper approached without haste and placed a cup down, with a gentle nod, as though the traveler had been expected all along. The fog thickened and the lantern halos. The fog thickened and the lantern halos grew larger, turning into soft moons. Boats were now half hidden, their masts fading into pale nothingness above. The traveler's eyelids felt heavier just looking at it, as though the fog itself was a message to rest. The keeper of the tea house glanced out as well, then spoke in a voice that was gentle and low, the kind of voice that never startled. "The harbor likes this," the keeper said softly. "The fog is kind to it." The traveler listened, not needing to answer. The keeper continued, almost as if telling the story to the steam rising from the cup. "Some towns fear fog," the keeper murmured. "They think it hides things. But here it's more like a quilt. It keeps the night calm. It keeps the harbor quiet. It helps the sea remember its gentlest manners." The traveler warmed their hands around the cup. In the fog, the lighthouse beam made a pale sweep, appearing and vanishing like a slow blink. "It feels peaceful," the traveler said at last, voice barely above a whisper. The keeper smiled, faint and knowing. "If you walk the quay now, you might hear the harbor's lullaby." That idea sounded like something made for sleep, like a line from a dream. The traveler finished the tea slowly, savoring the warmth. Then, with a soft nod of thanks, they stepped back into the night. Outside, the fog wrapped around them immediately, cool and damp, but not unpleasant. It felt like walking through a cloud. The traveler's hair and coat gathered tiny beads of moisture that caught the lantern light like dew. The harbor was quieter now. The shapes of the boats were more mysterious, some reduced to a curve of hull and a suggestion of mast, others almost gone, only their mooring lines and a faint silhouette telling the mind they were there. The water itself looked like dark velvet, with a pale skin of mist sliding over it. As the traveler walked, they became aware of how their footsteps sounded, softened by damp boards, absorbed by the fog. It felt as though the world had become private, close, protective. The traveler could see only a short distance ahead, but within that distance everything seemed calm and safe. Their face was lined but gentle, and their eyes were kind. As the traveler approached, the figure turned slightly, revealing a gentle smile. Their face was lined but gentle, and their eyes held the steady calm of someone who spent much of life watching weather and water. "Evening," the figure said quietly. The traveler returned the greeting. The figure nodded toward the fog. "She's come in properly tonight." The traveler looked out. "She?" The figure gave a small, amused hum. "That's what we call the fog. Not because she's a woman exactly, more because she feels familiar, like someone who visits, like someone who cares enough to show up." The traveler didn't question it. In this harbor, it felt natural to speak of fog as if it had intention, as if it was more than weather. The traveler leaned on the railing too, looking into the mist. "What does she do?" the traveler asked. "Restless. She reminds the boats to sleep, restless. She reminds the boats to sleep instead of rocking too hard, and sometimes the figure paused, listening. Sometimes she carries a song. The travelers strained their ears. At first, there was only the hush of fog, the faint lap of water, the occasional creak of rope. But then beneath it, something else seemed to thread through the air, a low, distant tone, like a note hummed by the world itself. It wasn't a melody in the usual sense. It was more like a pattern of sound repeating softly, rising and falling like breath. The traveler's shoulders lowered without thought. Their chest felt looser. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the water, from the fog, from the lantern light. The figure smiled as though noticing the traveler's response. "There it is," they whispered. They stood together for a while, listening. The traveler's mind began to drift, not in a confused way, but in a restful way, as if thoughts were floating away like small boats, unmoored, gliding gently into the fog. After some time, the figure pushed away from the railing. "If you're looking for somewhere to rest, there's an inn up the lane, warm fire, clean sheets. Tell them the harbor sent you." The traveler thanked them. The figure nodded once more, then disappeared into the mist with quiet footsteps, as if the fog itself had swallowed them kindly. The traveler turned toward the lane that led up from the quay. The town was muffled and dim, its cobblestones slick with moisture. Houses leaned close, their shutters closed, their doors snug. A few lamps burned in wall sconces, their light softened into glowing clouds. The traveler moved slowly, feeling the night's calm settle more deeply with each step. The inn was easy to find, as if it wanted to be found. Its sign, painted with a simple image of a sleeping boat, swung gently, squeaking in the damp. Inside, the air was warmer, scented with wood smoke and something hearty simmering in a pot. A fire burned low in the hearth, orange coals glowing like a gentle heart. The innkeeper spoke softly, as if loudness might disturb the fog outside. A room was offered without fuss. The traveler climbed creaking stairs and entered a small space with simple comforts: a bed with thick blankets, a window looking toward the harbor, a candle in a glass holder, and a chair near the sill. The traveler set down their bag and went to the window. Outside, the harbor was nearly gone, swallowed by fog. Only the nearest lantern showed clearly, its light a warm orb. Beyond that, everything was soft shapes and pale shadows. The lighthouse beam still moved, but it looked faint, like a dream of light, rather than light itself. The traveler sat in the chair and watched, feeling the pull of sleep like a tide. But there was still that suggestion of a lullaby threading through the air. The traveler opened the window a little. Cool, damp air slipped in, carrying the scent of the sea and the faintest taste of salt. The sound came with it too, low, repetitive, soothing. The traveler stayed there for a while, not thinking much, simply listening. As they listened, the fog seemed to grow brighter, not in a glaring way, but in a subtle way, as if it held its own pale light. It drifted past the window like slow breath. The traveler's eyes followed it without effort. And then, in the fog, something shimmered. At first, it could have been imagination, light catching on moisture, a trick of lantern and mist. But it lingered, a faint glimmer moving along the line where water would be, if water could be seen. The traveler felt no fear. The harbor's atmosphere was too gentle for fear. Curiosity, soft and sleepy, stirred instead. They lit the candle, pulled on their coat again, and returned downstairs. The innkeeper looked up briefly, but did not question the traveler's late stroll. Some places understood that the night sometimes called softly. Outside, the fog greeted the traveler like a familiar shawl. The town was quieter now, almost entirely still. The traveler walked back down to the harbor, guided by the nearest lantern orb and the memory of the quay's curve. When the traveler reached the water's edge, the shimmering was clearer. It moved in slow swirls on the surface, pale green-blue light like moonlit pearls. The traveler leaned over the railing and looked down. Tiny points of light gathered beneath the misty surface, as if the water held a field of stars. With each gentle lap against the dock, the stars stirred and drifted, making soft trails. The traveler had heard of such things, sea light, living glow, but seeing it here, wrapped in fog, made it feel like something more. It looked like the harbor was dreaming, with its eyes open. A quiet voice spoke from nearby, so close it seemed to rise out of the fog itself. "The water is singing too?" The traveler turned. The small person stood near the end of the dock, a child-sized figure in a cloak that looked woven from fog. Or perhaps it was simply a pale cloak, dampened by mist. The figure's face was hard to see clearly, as if the fog gently refused to give sharp edges to it. The traveler felt only calm. The figure's presence fit the harbor's mood like an extra note in the lullaby. "Who are you?" the traveler asked softly, not expecting a firm answer. The figure tilted their head, listening to something beyond human hearing. "A listener," the figure said. The voice was light, like wind through reeds, and yet it carried warmth. "A keeper of quiet, a friend of the harbor." The traveler looked back at the glowing water, then at the figure. "Is the fog alive?" The figure seemed to consider this as if the question was a pebble dropped into deep water. "The fog is a feeling," the figure said at last, "and feelings are alive in their own way. She comes when the harbor needs softness. She comes when the sea needs calming. She comes when tired hearts arrive and don't know where to put their weight." The traveler's breathing slowed further, matching the gentle rise and fall of the water. "Does she know I'm here?" A faint laugh, like a tiny bell, muffled by cloth. "Of course," the figure whispered. "She knows every step on these planks. She knows the way a sigh changes the air." The traveler's shoulders sank, heavy and comfortable. The fog felt thicker now, but not constricting. It was more like being held. The figure lifted a hand and pointed toward the harbor mouth, where the lighthouse stood on its headland. "If you want to understand, you can walk toward the light. Not all the way, just enough to feel the shoreline beneath your feet. She will guide you. The traveler did not feel compelled, only gently invited, and the invitation was soothing, like being offered a warm blanket. So the traveler began to walk, leaving the dock behind and following the path that curved along the water. The figure moved ahead, but not in a hurried way. Sometimes the traveler could see the pale cloak. Sometimes it melted into the fog and reappeared again as if it belonged to it. The path was lined with low grasses wet with mist. Rocks sat in dark heaps, their surfaces slick. The sea beyond was hidden, but its presence could be felt as a deeper hush, an open space of sound and scent. Lanterns were fewer here. The traveler depended on the lighthouse's slow beam, which sometimes washed across the path, turning fog into luminous milk for a moment. In those brief sweeps, the traveler saw details. A shell stuck between stones, a strand of kelp like dark ribbon, a small crab pausing mid-step as if embarrassed to be seen. Then the beam would pass, and the world returned to soft gray. The traveler's thoughts also became gray in the best way, blurred at the edges, quiet, unimportant. Worries that might have followed from the day seemed far away, unable to find the traveler through the fog. They walked until the harbor felt distant, until the sound of the inn in town was gone entirely. The only sounds were water breathing against rock, the hush of fog, the far-off low bell that chimed now and then, as if to reassure anyone listening that the harbor was still there. The figure stopped near a place where the path widened into a small overlook. There was a stone bench here, damp and ancient, as though it had waited a long time for tired travelers to sit. The figure gestured to it. The traveler sat. From this spot, the lighthouse was closer, its pale tower just visible through the fog when the beam swung around. The traveler could see the light source glow briefly within the lantern room, then vanish as the beam turned outward. The figure sat on the stone as well, feet dangling just above the ground, as though gravity was a suggestion rather than a rule. "She likes it when people come here," the figure whispered. The traveler looked at the fog which drifted in slow folds. "Why?" "Because it means you're listening," the figure said. "Most people are busy talking to the inside of their own minds, but fog invites listening. Fog says, hush. Fog says, slow down. Fog says, let the world be soft." The traveler felt the truth of that in their bones. Their body seemed to sink deeper into rest, even sitting upright. The muscles along their back loosened. Their hands became warm and heavy on their lap. The figure reached down and picked up a small stone from the ground. In the dimness, it looked ordinary, but when the lighthouse beam passed, the stone flashed with a faint inner sheen, like it held a sliver of moonlight. "Sometimes," the figure said, "the harbor gives gifts, not big gifts, quiet ones. A stone that reminds you what calm feels like. A shell that sounds like the sea when you hold it to your ear. A bit of driftwood that smells like storms that have already passed." The traveler watched the stone in the figure's hand. "And the fog?" "The fog is the biggest quiet gift," the figure said, "because you can't keep it, You can only receive it for a while, and while it's with you, you can let it teach you how to let go. The traveler's eyelids fluttered, heavy. The lullaby sound returned, clearer here, still not a melody, more like breath turned into music. It rose and fell, in time with the sea. The figure's voice grew even softer. If you close your eyes, you might feel her better. The traveler did close their eyes. The fog's coolness brushed their cheeks. Moisture gathered lightly on eyelashes. The air felt clean and gentle as it entered the lungs. The traveler listened. The sound was soothing, repeating, never surprising. It was the sound of something ancient and patient. The sound of a harbor that had held many nights like this, many sleepy hearts, many quiet arrivals. In the traveler's mind, images floated up without effort. A boat rocking slowly in its slip, ropes sighing as they tightened and loosened, lanterns becoming round moons in mist, the lighthouse beam turning through fog like a slow, protective gaze. The figure's presence beside them felt like companionship, but not demanding, like being near someone who was content with silence. After a time, the figure spoke again, as if the fog had asked them to. Long ago, the figure murmured, the harbor was rougher. Winds came in sharp. Waves snapped at the docks. Boats knocked and banged, and people slept with tense shoulders, waiting for the next storm. The traveler listened, half dreaming. One night, the figure continued, someone lit a lantern and wished for gentleness. Not wealth, not excitement, not change, just gentleness. And the sea heard. The sea is wild, but it understands wishes. It carried the wish into the air as vapor, as breath, as a soft promise, and the wish became fog. The traveler could almost see it. Fog forming from a wish like warmth from a cup of tea. Since then, the figure said, fog comes whenever the harbor calls for softness. It arrives without judgment. It wraps the boats. It hushes the waves. It blurs the edges of everything sharp. It turns the world into something you can rest inside. The traveler's breathing matched the story's pace, slow and deep, as though each word was a hand smoothing a blanket. And now, the figure whispered, the harbor shares that softness with anyone who needs it, even travelers, especially travelers. The traveler's head dipped slightly, chin lowering, as sleepiness settled more deeply. The stone bench felt cool and steady beneath them. The damp air felt like comfort. The figure's cloak, fog or fabric rustled softly. Time to return, the figure said, but it sounded like a lullaby too, not an instruction. Not because anything is ending, just because rest is waiting. The traveler opened their eyes slowly, like waking within a dream. The fog was thick, but the lighthouse beam still moved, faithful and calm. The traveler stood with no hurry, joints loose, heart quiet. At times it seemed to dissolve, but the traveler never felt lost. The fog itself seemed to guide them, turning the air a fraction brighter where the path went. dimming gently where it did not. Soon the harbor's lantern orbs appeared again, warm and close. The docks emerged from mist like old friends. Boats bobbed quietly. Their presence suggested more than shown. The glowing water still shimmered, and the traveler paused to look once more. The points of light beneath the surface stirred and swirled, like stars settling into comfortable patterns. The traveler glanced for the small figure, but it was gone. Or perhaps it had become fog entirely. There was no sadness in that. It felt natural, as if the harbor only lent the figure for as long as it was needed. The traveler returned to the inn. Inside, the fire had burned down to coals, and the air was warm in a sleepy way. The innkeeper looked up, eyes gentle, and offered a small nod as though saying, "Yes, the harbor has done what it does." Upstairs, the traveler entered their room. The candle's flame flickered as the door closed, then steadied. The traveler took off their coat, folded it neatly, and sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, listening. Through the slightly open window came the hush of fog and the faint, steady lullaby of the sea. The lighthouse beam passed now and then, turning the fog outside the window into a pale glow that slid across the glass and disappeared. The traveler lay down. The blankets were thick and soft. The pillow cradled the head gently, as though shaped by kindness. For a while, the traveler simply breathed. The inhale came cool and quiet. The exhale left warm and slow. The body grew heavier with every breath, sinking into the mattress as if it were sand receiving a footprint. Outside, the harbor continued its calm rituals. Boats rocked with small, sleepy movements. Ropes sighed, lanterns glowed. Fog drifted and folded, drifting and folding, never hurried. The traveler's thoughts loosened further. Images became softer. The lighthouse beam became a slow blink in the mind. The shimmering water became a distant constellation. And the fog, patient, tender, seemed to move right up to the window, as if to check in. In the quiet, the traveler imagined the fog as a gentle presence, not watching in a sharp way, but simply being near, like a warm hand, resting close. The harbor's lullaby wrapped around everything, steady and comforting, the way a mother hums without thinking, the way a kettle whispers before sleep. The traveler's eyelids grew heavier and then heavier still, until keeping them open felt unnecessary. The face relaxed, the tongue rested. The shoulders melted down. The fog outside thickened, blurring the world into softness. The lighthouse beam kept its slow circle, but it no longer mattered where it went. It was enough to know it was there. The traveler drifted as if floating on calm water. Breath in and out. The harbor breathed too. In the distance, the bell chimed again, low and tender, and the sound seemed to say, "All is well." The traveler's mind became quiet, like a room where lamps have been turned down. Thoughts moved far away, their footsteps muffled. The body settled into a deep comfort, warm and safe. Fog over the gentle harbor, a soft world, a slow night. And now you can let yourself follow that softness, letting your own mind become misty at the edges, letting your worries fade like boats, disappearing into fog. Let your breathing stay easy. Let your body be heavy. Let the story keep drifting even if you stop listening closely, because it will not mind, and neither will you. The harbor will keep humming. The fog will keep folding. The lighthouse will keep turning its patient light. And you can sleep. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.